Welcome to Chapter 3, where we dive deep into the world of React. But even before we do that, and although React, this is going to be our main topic, React and just React, our visual layer, I wanted to take a second just to talk about our separation. Well, in this chapter, our focus is going to be on React. I want you to think, as we're doing this, where do you think the data should live? And I'm assuming you are thinking about it already because you're taking a title that is called Mastering Flux. And throughout this chapter, we're going to talk a lot about why do we want to separate between our visual layer and our data layer. So by the end of this chapter, that we will be building a baseline task, we'll create dynamic components, we'll be thinking in a reusable way, adding user-initiated events, and using the state to store new tasks. I want you to think about why would you want to take the data out of the flow. I would love to hear from you about that as well, because there's a lot of really good answers to that. But we're not going to answer that in this intro, but instead of that, jump right into our first lecture in this chapter, which is about building a baseline task component, where we'll be building a we'll give our full attention to building out a task for our to-do list. It's going to be our baseline task, and we're going to use for the first time the props, namely the children, to populate our task. But again, think about the data and where do you think the data should live? Let's jump right into it. Alright, welcome back to a new chapter, and in this chapter our focus is React, so let's jump and start reacting. Not figuratively, literally. Get out of your chair and start jumping. Okay, so we created our core component, our first component that is really our application component, you could say, but in our case it's our tasks component in the last chapter. Let's continue down the line and actually fill it up with actual real content. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new file, and I'm going to call it task because it's going to be our singular task of our tasks. Now, every single component in React has a similar structure, so I'm just going to go ahead and paste everything inside of here and just change the name from tasks to task. And let's go ahead and change this to 3.5 if we're already on a roll. Now, in our tasks component, now that I've created a new task, I'm going to go ahead and import it. So I'm going to import task from same folder. And I am going to also use it. So I'm going to go ahead here and set here a task. Now, I am going to make it self-enclosed. And if I go ahead and save this, and go back into and if already we're doing this, let's go ahead and also maybe automate a bit of this process so we don't have to repackage every time that we are going to change something. So to do that, I'm going to go into my package.config, and in my pack for Webpack, I'm going to just, actually I'm not going to change it here. Let's change it in our config file itself, and I'm just going to go ahead here and add here a watch value and set it to be true. Now, just by doing this was enough. So whenever I'm going to go back into my terminal and I'm going to go ahead and call I'm going to call npm run pack. It's going to actually run, but not only is it going to run, it's going to continuously continue running. In other words, if I'm going to go ahead here and I'm going to change this to Hello World 3.6 and save it, we will see that it will automatically repackage again. And our server will repackage again, which is awesome because so everyone is doing its job separately. Last thing that's left for us to do manually is to just click on the refresh to be able to see that update. Now, by the way, technically speaking, you could also do something that's called hot refreshes with Webpack. We're not going to get into that because we're going on the server and the client, and it's a little bit complicated, but there are ways to do it, and in some of my titles, I do cover it in past titles that we've done with Pact on React. So I'm just going to continue down our path. So we created our component, but obviously in a real world scenario, our tasks area is not just going to, our task is not just going to add a task, it's going to add multiple tasks, and it's going to also add content into those tasks. So in this case, what I really would want to have is task.task, and maybe add here some sort of a content. So for example, our content might be Hello World 3.7, right? So let me just go ahead here and change it to Hello World 3.7, And now to be able to get that content inside, we're going to be introduced to a new property that you might be familiar with already, which is called our this.props. Now, this.props are the properties that are sent into each element, each component more accurately in React. And anything that is the child or the content within element is called children. So I'm going to go ahead here and call children, and getting our children will be suffice it for us, and our refresh should happen automatically. All that should be left is to click there on refresh, and we shall see now that what have we done. So we extracted out our task component. Beyond extracting our task component out, we've also basically enabled us to basically send in these tasks in our task. We haven't done that step yet, but I want to continue and just make our task a little bit more visually pleasing. Now, to do that, I'm going to go ahead and go into my browser, and let's go ahead and find our Bootstrap, and it will be loading at some point. Pause, play when it loads. My internet is slow today. And I'm going to go ahead and download Bootstrap currently in its alpha version, but just download whatever version that is currently the one that is working. And I cannot speak slower than this, even if I wanted to. Oh, here we go. So download. I'm just going to go ahead and grab the CSS link. I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to place it in my project. In a real world Word application, you're right, you wouldn't be using such a massive file, but instead of that, you would use Sass and just grab the specific items you want from Bootstrap. In our case, we're just taking it all, and we're just assuming that it's fine because this is not a real production environment. Okay, so let's go ahead and save this, and hopefully if we're not incredibly slow, let's go back into our task here and just modify things around here so it will actually be a button. So it's going to be a button, it's going to be a type of button, and it's going to have a class name. By the way, in React, you would not type your class for class, but you're going to type your class name. And that is to basically, because class is a reserved word in basically JavaScript ES6, so we can't use the word class. So class name it is btn primary, btn large, btn block. All right, I'm just setting things up in motion, and it's going to be a button as well. Close tag, and let's just go ahead and save this. And if we go back into our browser, and if my internet is not incredibly slow, which it actually is, then we will have here a beautiful button. And after we see this beautiful button, I will take a break and try to figure out what the hell is wrong with my internet. Come on, you could do it. You could do it. Maybe you can't. Come on, I have faith in you. Oh, yeah, here we go. Hello World 3.7. So that's it. We've created our really first real component. And let's continue down this rabbit line of actually making our content dynamic in the next lecture. In this lecture, we started building out our task literally by creating our first task.